Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Virtual Roadtrek Rally. And today we're going to have a presentation on kind of a unique topic that came up on the forum the other day. And so we're happy to have Rob Ennis here to share with us a bit of his knowledge on dealing with severe weather. And a lot of times we're out on the road and we see reports of a bad storm or a hurricane or something, and we have a little bit of nervousness maybe. And Rob is a journalist. Also, he's a road trekker, lives in Indiana area when he's home, and he's written some articles on this topic. So I'm sure he's well versed to share with us about how to deal with some supreme weather conditions that we may find ourselves in. So I'm going to ask everyone to put themselves on mute while Rob is talking, so we don't have interference from barking dogs or phones going off. And then after we'll have a Q&A and discuss anything more and give you a chance to talk to Rob one-on-one. So Rob, just continue on to introduce yourself. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us on this beautiful Saturday morning, and we'll let you take over from here.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I got interested in the topic of handling emergency situations, emergency weather. In my road trek because we were experiencing extreme weather in our road trek like a year or two ago. Yeah, it was kind of a scary situation where very stormy, the winds, you could feel the road trek kind of leaning whichever way the wind was blowing. So it was definitely a nerve-wracking experience the night that we spent out there wondering what we should do. So earlier this year, I contacted the National Weather Service and spoke to one of their experts, and he walked me through a few of the things to be considerate of and to think of when the weather turns bad. So yeah, I guess we'll start out. I'm just going to, and let me just say, I interviewed the expert. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. So hopefully there's a little bit of stuff that I might be able to add that was left on the cutting room floor. But for the most part, Doug, who I interviewed, he was the expert, and he would be a good resource for people to reach out to. Yeah, so before, and the main thing I did after I wrote this article is I went out and bought a weather radio, and a NOAA certified weather radio, which it's great because no matter if I have power or not, it always works. You can actually crank it to the side. And the radio is actually in my van right now. Otherwise, I would actually show you what one looks like. But yeah, you can, if you run out of juice, you can crank it, and that's enough to get the batteries going in there. I've always been, I don't want to say a hoarder, but I always make sure to bring plenty of food and water whenever I go on a trip. So I always have plenty in case we get snowed in or what have you. Let me see here. And even if we are in a location, like I typically, I like to go where the weather's warm. Being in Indiana, the winters can get pretty bad here. So when I travel, I like to actually get away from all the snow and dreariness. But I always, keep cold weather gear, a little bit of cold weather gear in my van, just in case. I know there's been times in the past where, an unexpected cold front goes through, and like what happened with my friend Ron and his RV. He was, traveling in Texas, and in the span of a day, the temperatures dropped from 75 to 15 degrees, so like a 60-degree shift. So yeah, it's always good to have extra, some long pants, some like maybe a sweatshirt, like a jacket that you can layer and be able to keep warm. Any questions so far before I keep rambling on?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
We were one time in our RV park, and we had been traveling, and we got to the RV park, and we could see the severe weather coming in. And so we whipped out our NOAA weather radio and started listening, and they said, yeah, severe is a tornado watch in Fannin County. And I thought, what the hell county am I in? And it was really a problem because with the GPS receiver and just the information we had available just quickly, it was not easy to determine the county that we were actually in. And that's an interesting problem because they oftentimes report by county. And so being able to determine your county is really is an interesting problem that we ran into. And so, so I would point that out, that one of the things is knowing what county you're in is really useful. I will say something else too, real quickly, and that is in the States, the National Weather Service offers weather training for the weather watchers, for the people who do storm watching, for the Weather Service, the amateur radio operators and the like. And anybody can attend that training. And it's like a few hours on a Saturday, and they've been doing it by Zoom now. And so you can check the National Weather Service information and actually attend one of those weather schools. And it tells you how to distinguish between a dangerous set of clouds and conditions versus what they call a scary looking cloud. So it's real interesting training. It's only a few hours and well worth the time. I'll shut up.
Oh no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, and I definitely want to check out the NOAA Weather Watcher training. That could actually be another article coming up. I'll just go through some certain weather situations, and forgive my cat here. Some severe weather situations, and just give some advice on whether you should stay, go, or I guess those are your only two options. So tornado. Doug's advice is to ditch your rig and take shelter in the most secure location you can find. And usually when you're in like maybe an RV park or a state park campground, the bathrooms are usually made of cinder block or are pretty sturdy, so you can usually take refuge in them if need be. Camp offices usually are a good place to take shelter. And if you're on the road and you don't have time to get off the interstate and you see a tornado in your rear view mirror, one of the worst things you can do and this was a surprise to me, is to park under an overpass for shelter. Apparently, those are prone to crumble and to they're not as secure as you would think. So there's you have reduced visibility. So there have been cases where people are taking shelter underneath an overpass, and they actually run in. They rear end you. They run into you because like everyone else, visibility is almost shot. So in that case, the best situation is to park as far along to the right, to the road, off the road as possible, and take shelter in like a drainage ditch or in the lowest level of ground you can find, which sounds terrifying, and I'm sure it would be, but that's the best solution in where you don't really have a lot of great options.
So Rob, are you suggesting then from the information you have is that we should not stay in our rig, we should get out and get into a ditch somewhere or get protected outside of our rigs?
Exactly. If you're like off the, if you're like on an interstate or a county road or you're traveling, get out of the rig and into a ditch or a low lining area. If you're in a campground, definitely seek shelter in a, the most secure building that you can find, that has some kind of foundation.
Would you be better to park out in the open with your road track, or are you better to try and get adjacent to a larger building?
In the case of, so when talking about the severe, like a severe thunderstorm and, with the high winds that constitute a severe thunderstorm, a friend of mine that I interviewed for this article, he had talked about driving around locations and trying to take shelter behind buildings. And I told Doug with the National Weather Service about that. And even though we were on the phone, you could almost hear his skin crawl over the phone lines when he heard that, because once again, with severe winds and storms, those buildings can topple or crumble. Personally, I mean, I think that your best solution would probably be to park in a location that's somewhat sheltered from the wind, assuming that it's like a sturdy building, and then take shelter, because once again you're in a situation where if you're taking shelter in a building because it's more secure than your road trek, you would hope that the building, that same building, isn't going to collapse on you when you're taking shelter in it. So
hey, Jeffrey had a comment. Do you want to just share your comment, Jeffrey? Just push your space bar to turn your mic on.
Oh, morning, everyone. I'm from Central Ohio, and about 3 years ago, we had a bad tornado come through just north of Columbus, and they actually, Delaware State Park, it is a state park, has built a tornado shelter, because they had a bunch of RVs go through and trees come down. It's about 3 or 4 years ago. So it's a great camping spot. But yeah, they built a tornado shelter at the park for all the park residents. So that's it.
Oh, that's
Interesting.
great.
I'll add
Interesting.
I'll add something too. I think one of the things that they taught us at the school, which I think is really interesting, and that is about wind, because anything below 50 miles an hour from the standpoint of the Weather Service is not considered a dangerous situation. It may blow small limbs around, a lot of things that can look pretty frightening, but 50 miles an hour. But you start trees start toppling and losing roof shingles and whatever, then you're above 50 miles an hour. And of course, and those types of winds can be extremely damaging. The other thing is that I would say, and that they talked to us about, was this whole issue of being weather aware. You know, the whole point of taking shelter and whatever, you know, if you have seconds, you don't have a whole lot of options. It's like flying an airplane. You're looking for a place to land in an emergency. You know, if you're a good pilot, you're constantly looking for a place to ditch your airplane because you never know when it might happen. And so the point being is that be aware of the weather. And one more thing, which is really interesting to me, and that is that when it comes to rain, if you understand the way tornadoes form, they talk about the wall clouds and the rain-free base, and then the rain ahead of the storm. And the storm typically moves in the direction you won't be able to see the tornado when it's coming at you, which is the worst situation. You see this horrible-looking weather formation and cloud and immense rain, and of course, right behind that is a funnel cloud, which you can't see. Most of the time, if you can see the funnel cloud, the odds of it hitting you is much, much less than if you can't see it. And I know here in Texas, Oklahoma, having grown up in this part of the world, one of the biggest signs of severe weather is this rapid, dramatic temperature drop, and that's when the front comes through. And so that's when you feel that, you're right in the area where these things are going to happen. So anyway, but I'll shut up. But I can say those are a couple of things that I've experienced. Yeah, and the other thing too is the green clouds. If you ever seen green clouds, then look out.
Green.
All right, man, I'm learning a lot. So with floods, I've been in situations where I've been parking, where I've parked in a national forest and near a creek, and we've actually had the park ranger or Forest Service personnel come out and strongly advise us to move out as quickly as possible because impending heavy rains and potential flooding. So
did he tell you where to move out to?
He did not give he didn't give us any great options. Pretty much it was, if I remember correctly, it was Pisgah National Forest. And, he suggested that we just move out. And luckily Brevard is right there, and it's a little bit, I believe that's a little bit higher and away from the creek as the rest of the forest. And this has been like a few years ago, so, please don't quote me on that. So what Doug told me with the National Weather Service, because I knew to avoid driving over roads that look to be submerged, just because, depending on how fast the water is moving, it could, those currents can sweep away your vehicle. But one of the things that he mentioned to me that I hadn't even thought about was those roads, the floods, the water, they're actually going and eating away at the ground beneath the road. So his main concern was you would try to drive over one of these flooded areas, and you would just pretty much the road, the submerged road would just crumble, and you would just sink into the ground where the area is flooded and not be able to get out. So that, I think, was his biggest worry there. And then, of course, we all know that, especially if you're camping, pardon me, in the desert, like BLM land, and, you're in areas that are prone to flash flooding. Luckily, I don't think I've ever camped in like a dry riverbed or anything. And I think those are pretty much away from where most of us would actually camp. But he was very adamant that you should be careful where you're parking your rig in, like, when you're camping in BLM land or places where there's no assigned campsites, because unbeknownst to you, that water might at some point be, just be rushing through, and you wouldn't be aware until it's too late.
Has anybody had any experiences with washouts or flash flooding? I understand that, for those of us who aren't experienced in desert camping, I understand they can come pretty quick, those flash floods. Does anybody have any experience with those?
Well, I don't have a whole lot of direct experience, but there are some pretty impressive stories. You should Google Big Thompson flood in Colorado. It happened a good many years ago, and there were a number of campers that were washed away. And the irony of it is that many of them were warned. The park rangers came around and warned them that it was the middle of the night. They needed to move because of the danger of flash flood. And there were a number of people killed. So Big Thompson flood is a really tragic story of a flood involving camping and campers that were washed away. And the other thing too is that I've seen videos of these roads, and you see a culvert, and of course the road will collapse within seconds. And so it's pretty terrifying. So he's really right about the roads. They may look just like a little water on top, but there's water all around and flowing, and the culverts can wash out, and first thing you know, the road collapses. And so pretty terrifying. There are some really spectacular videos on the internet where you can see this kind of phenomenon. So
okay.
What is it? Turn around, don't drown is the slogan they use. So and it happens every year. There are people that drown because of these. They drive in, it looks like a low water crossing, and they get swept away, and then they drown. Can't get the doors open.
Well, thank you. Deb had a couple comments about some apps that were available. Deb, do you want to share?
Sure. I have lots to talk about as usual, but I'll try to be limiting. First, on the water situation, anyone that's done it learned their lesson well. I went through, it wasn't in the road trek, but I went through a very small amount of flowing water in a country road in Texas where it came on suddenly like a flash flood, but not in a gulch. And I knew that the water was running. It didn't look bad. I didn't have a car in front of me to give me a feel for what was going to happen. So I put myself well into the other lane, the lane approaching me, so that if there was any pressure, I wouldn't go too far. And I was absolutely shocked. In just a matter of few yards, my car went from fully in the left-hand lane all the way to the other side of the right-hand lane. It was shocking, and I will never, ever attempt to go through any kind of flowing water again. I also one time got directed by the police to go through a standing set of water on a road, and I didn't want to. I wanted to go around, and they were waving me on and waving me on, and this was in the road trek. And I paid dearly for that, ended up having to replace a solenoid or something because there were issues that water created somewhere under the van. On the apps, I have 2 or 3 that I really, really like. Dark Sky is without a doubt the best because it will immediately tell you your location if you want, or any location you ask for, and gives you a minute-to-minute accounting of what the weather is going to do. In half an hour, the rain will begin. In 45 minutes, it will be heavy. The wind will be here. Anyone that doesn't have Dark Sky might really want to look at that. It's a great app with a lot of recommendations by the professionals, and also is considered not as, it doesn't eat up as much of your phone as some like weather app, like WeatherBug does or something. Another phone app that I used occasionally and like is called Trip Weather. And now these are iOS, these are iPhone apps, but Dark Sky I know is both Android and iOS. Trip Weather lets you put a starting point in and a finish point in. It lets you say what day and what time you're going to begin the trip. And then it shows you just in little icons what the weather is going to be like throughout the entire trip. And you can click on the icons and it will give you more details for that particular location. And then that's kind of a nice one for planning ahead. The same availability on your laptop, not on your phone. There is a great website called Get There Dry. Get There Dry. And it does the same thing. It lets you put in your starting point, tell them where you're going and what time, what day and what time you're leaving. And it maps out the weather as you go. Now I'll shut up, but I will tell you, I also have tornado and lightning stories. So whenever.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, carry on, Rob.
Hey, thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
And hey, and it was nice to actually, kind of meet you after all the advice you've given me on the forum. So very good to see, to put a face, like a larger face with a name. One of the things I didn't talk about in the article, just for lack of space, is wildfires, because we are, it's getting to a point where wildfire season is something that we have to take into account every time we go out west, and that can be, there could be a fire started. And just because it moves so fast, I mean, you could just, get notification of, a fire in your area, and then minutes later, it's on you. So one of the main suggestion that Doug mentioned was, no matter where you're camping, have an entrance and an exit strategy. Make sure that you're not camping at the end of a like a dirt road or any kind of road for that matter. Make sure that you have two methods of ingress and egress, because if that fire comes at you, and that's the only way you're getting out of that camping area, it's going to be a scary situation. Going back to severe thunderstorms, generally being in an RV will protect you from lightning, but it won't protect you from the wind component, like those heavy, severe winds.
I just share with you my one time with the fire. I was in Idlewild, California when that big fire came. And I was very surprised. I mean, I smelled the smoke. I saw the ash. The California State Park hadn't quite said anything. So I called my friends and I asked them to turn on the news down in Palm Springs to see. There was no information. And yet I could see the smoke was getting worse, and it looked like snow flurry. So finally, the state people came and knocked on the door of my rig and said, evacuate, one word, evacuate. And then when you get to the exit, they pointed how to get out. But, sometimes with the wildfires, it's amazing that they can sneak up on you like that.
Mm-hmm.
At first people around me were saying, oh, that's far away. That's far away. Yeah, but we were downwind. So in no time at all, throw everything in the rig and get out of Dodge, The other thing I wanted to mention about the floods, in case people from other parts of the country don't realize it, in places like Arizona, the thunderstorm could be miles away and the water can take time to get to you. But if you're in a flood basin, if you're in a spot that's designated the path for flood waters to go, you shouldn't be there, even if the storm is miles away, because eventually that mountain water is going to pick up speed and come through. There's a famous story of a whole Boy Scout troop getting wiped out. They didn't realize that they were in danger, and then it was too late when the water came. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, and that's an important point. Doug suggested that if you can see the storm in the distance, even if it's not, you know, what you'd consider like near you, then it's something to definitely be concerned about. And that situational awareness, I mean, that goes through all of these the stories. You know, pay attention to the weather outside, pay attention to like the cues, whether it be the green skies in tornado season, or the running storm, or like the huge storms for potential flooding. And then listen to your intuition and listen to your gut. And if you think that if you feel like unease about that situation, just get out. And then timing. Timing is something that we should always be aware of when we're planning our trips. You know, for wildfire season, you know, August, September, and even going into the very beginning of October out west, that's becoming like a big wildfire season. And if you can avoid being in that area, or know that you have to take extra precautions during those months, that would be best. You know, it's just like, you know, maybe avoiding Oklahoma in May during tornado season, or you know, Florida always.
Oklahoma year round. I lived there. The hail is another one we haven't talked about. Oh
yeah.
My God, I have been not feared for my life, but feared for the life of my RV. That when hail and tornadoes, ridiculous, and earthquakes. I did not realize I'd be living through earthquakes because I moved to Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma? Oh wow.
It's fracking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Rocked me almost, I couldn't believe it, sleeping, and I could feel it like a cradle in my bed. I think 5.2 was the worst, something.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this past fall, I was doing a road trip in the Dakotas, in the Badlands and Black Hills. And I was camping in Nomad View, right outside of Wall. And the wind was just unbelievable. And it was one of those things where I don't know if it was, you know, if it was normal for that time of year, or what the deal was, or maybe it was just like a bad night, but you could actually feel the van just kind of like leaning as these huge wind gusts were just blaring, you know, like just blasting through. Yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking, but I was never in any real fear of the van flipping, but it was definitely unease. And one other thing that Doug mentioned about the wildfires is, and it kind of goes back to that ingress egress. You know, take the time to familiarize yourself with maps, or just general information about the area that you're camping in. Just that way, if you need to evacuate, you have a little bit of background knowledge, you know, for, you know, whether it's detours, you know, staying out of the path of the wildfires, etc. just having, taking 5 minutes to look over a map, could save you from, trying to navigate in a high stress, life-threatening situation. And then the last thing I'll talk about is snowstorms and blizzards. One of the things that Doug suggested is, the first thing you should do if you get snowed in your road trek is to shovel out the exhaust, especially for your generator, because if the snow piles in around the exhaust, it's not going to be able to get out. So the path of least resistance is back into your vehicle. So the worst thing to do is to wait out a situation in your road trek, just running your generator or the engine for the van, and not have it dug out, because the carbon monoxide will eventually get you. And I don't keep I don't do a lot of cold weather camping. So I don't own like a set of traction boards or anything like that. I do have leveling blocks that, if need be, I can use to, help get traction going in or out of the snow. And I do keep an all-purpose shovel, like a collapsible all-purpose shovel in the back of my rig, whether it's to shovel out snow, or there have been cases where I've been camping in a campground with my wife, and the water outlet for the campsite over snapped and flooded the entire area, and I had to dig a trench around my van so that water could kind of channel and go into like a lower lining area and avoid my campsite. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have.
So does anybody have any comments or questions for Rob?
I think I missed out one important remedy, and that's to run. If you know it's coming, start up your engine. I outran a tornado in Texas. I called AAA because I didn't know who else to call, and they asked me where I was, and I said, I have no idea. I'm in between California and Florida. And they said, well, where's the storm? I said, well, it's like as dark as night behind me, and it looks like a cloudy day in front of me. So how fast are you traveling? I'm going 80. And then she said, well, that storm is moving at 60. So just keep going. And I did. I reached a point where there was blue sky.
Mm-hmm.
Next day on the news, it said it had done some damage, back there. And so when I reached San Antonio, it was a sunny day. So you can sometimes be lucky, but you have to know that information we talked about before. You have to know which way it's going and how fast it's traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also helpful if you understand where you're at, or roughly where you're at. And I even find driving down the interstate, I mentally take note of the mile markers, because if you break down and you have to call CAA or AAA for help, or anybody else for help, you need to have a kind of a rough idea of where you're located, or they can't be much assistance.
Can I add something to that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the advice everybody gives in weather like fires or floods, it's evacuate, get the hell out of there. But with tornadoes, the advice you always get is sacrifice your vehicle, leave it in the path of tornado, and you personally take shelter. Why isn't it the same advice to run, get out of there?
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something to that? Most of the time, tornadoes in North America move from southwest to northeast, along with prevailing wind. And if a tornado is happening, if you are able to move in a perpendicular direction, that is either northwest or southeast, chances are you will get out of its path quicker. But how many people have the presence of mind to do it, and how many people are lucky enough to have roads going the right way and know how to use them is a really big problem, which is why I think most of the time they say just seek shelter, because outrunning a tornado is often more than just stepping on the gas. It's knowing which way to go.
Two other just things to mention. One is summertime, we're out camping at a nice state park or a Corps of Engineer campground, and we're looking for shade. So we're parking under trees. And as storms approach, one of the things, just simple thing that you might want to consider is backing the van up and getting out from under that big branch, because that is something that it may not kill you, but it can cause some pretty serious damage. I've even been in campgrounds where there were things that fell out of the trees, huge acorn-like things or pine cones that can do some damage. So that's something to think about too, look up. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned that I always bring up is the protection, the electrical protection systems, surge protectors, electrical management systems. In a campground, lightning struck a tree nowhere near me. It wasn't about to be in any danger at all, but it really did some damage to the campground's electrical system. I slept through it. I woke up in the morning, there were fire trucks and policemen all over the place, and I didn't even know why. And my neighbor said, "Oh my gosh, you know, this is what happened." And I was the only vehicle in the campground that did not have damage due to the malfunctioning of the electrical system, because I had an EMS system plugged in. So that's something to think about as well.
I think it's also important to realize that there are surge protectors and there are surge suppressors. And so if you want to protect yourself adequately, you want to spend at least $300 on one of those units. The $100, the $150 units are suppressors, but they're not total power management systems. And so don't go cheap when it comes to those units. There's all sorts of discussions, and we had a coverage on one of our prior virtual rally sessions about those units. Lots of good videos there. So make sure you don't skimp on cost when you buy one of those, because in those situations you get what you pay for.
Right, it's EMS versus surge protector when you're looking for the actual systems, EMS. And you can get them for under $300 now. I've seen them down on sale as low as about $250, maybe $275. But the surge protector alone is always well under $200. So that's how you know which one you're looking at.
Okay, thanks, Debbie.
Too, that's easy.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said you can always, when the weather looks really bad, you can unplug, and I have done that many times. So, and that's the best protection you can have, is to unplug. And so, if the weather looks really bad, you can always unplug. So,
okay, well, Rob, thank you so much for sharing with us your insights and the information you've gathered on dealing with severe weather. Hopefully, it's prepared many of us, and lots of our members have also shared some of their experiences and some tips that they've learned along the way. So thank you so much for joining us today.